This is the Good Government Podcast with Aaron Slutkin and Michael Hoffpauir.
Hi, Aaron. How you doing?
Hey, Mike. I'm well. How are you?
Okay. Thanks for asking. I'm excited to be talking about some Federalist Papers with you yet again. Today, we're going to talk about Federalist Paper 8.
This time we've only broken off one to chew on.
Yeah, our ambitions are still great, but I think we're doing well here with this little 5-page Federalist Paper number 8, although only 5 pages, a very important paper. Federalist Papers 3 through 5 are the dangers that the citizens will face from foreign governments if the citizens elect not to ratify the proposed Constitution and preserve the Union. And on the other hand, Federalist Papers 6 through 8 are about the consequences of hostilities between the states that will issue from the failure to ratify the Constitution and preserve the Union. And I really mean it the way I said it. We are to understand that we cannot keep the Union without ratifying the Constitution. Without the Constitution, there's no Union. And I would add, without the Union, there's no Constitution. And what I mean by that last point is that union is essential to safety. So if you make the Constitution and don't have unity between all 13 states, the Constitution's in a lot of trouble from without. And then within looks different at this point, but the dangers from within would be from within the continental United States at this point, running up and down the East Coast. So Federalist 8 is really wonderful because the lessons of Federalist 6 and 7 are brought home to roost. America is susceptible to the same problems as everywhere else. This is a rule of international relations that's rooted in human nature, applied within the continent. The same things that would lead people to war against each other in Europe will lead us to war against each other here. The soil and the thrice blessings that we have in Federalist Paper number 2, that's not going to keep us from behaving exactly the same as everybody else. We need to do something about it. Publius is here to help.
This paper is not called The Same Subject Continued.
Yeah.
This is the effects of internal war and producing standing armies and other institutions unfriendly to liberty. Publius argues that the division of the states into separate nations disunited, into separate confederacies, will, as in Federalist 7, lead to constant war. And this constant war, as the title suggests, will lead to standing armies and other institutions unfriendly to liberty, namely strong monarchical executives, kings. So there is a rhetorical trick here. You anti-federalists are concerned about standing armies. They're mentioned in the Declaration as a chief complaint against King George III. When this Constitution is ratified, it will be conditionally ratified and attached to it a Bill of Rights mentioning an amendment forbidding the quartering of troops in the homes of Americans. Standing armies are a chief concern of Americans in the 18th century. And here's the trick. You Americans concerned about standing armies. Sure, this Constitution does give the federal government power to raise an army. But if you're concerned about standing armies, you ought to be concerned if we do not ratify the Constitution, because constant warfare between separate states, separate confederacies, will mean that they will raise armies and keep them on their borders. And you Americans who are concerned about a strong executive, actually what you should do is adopt the Constitution, which creates a strong executive. The reason being, constant warfare strengthens the executive. Publius says in the 5th paragraph, states would be obliged to strengthen the executive arm of the government, in doing which their constitutions would acquire a progressive direction towards monarchy. It is of the nature of war to increase the executive at the expense of the legislative authority. We'll bring this up when Publius does this in the future, but sometimes this rhetorical tool is to say, you're worried about this concern, you anti-federalists. Actually, you don't get it. If you're worried about a small republic, if you're worried about a standing army, if you're worried about a strong executive, then the solution is not to reject the Constitution as you wish. It's to ratify it. Brilliant.
Yeah, it says they misunderstand the matter so severely. And also to state it differently, Aaron, in agreement, but to think about it from a different angle. All of your solutions are only going to breed your misery. I'm just repeating your point. You're worried about a strong executive. All war breeds a strong executive. From here to eternity, no matter regime type, the executive gets strong during war. So that's a fact. So you're worried about a strong executive. What you're really worried about is war. Hey, the United States Constitution as proposed with its union is going to greatly lessen the likelihood of war, and therewith the strength of the executive. That's awesome. I agree with you completely, Aaron. And if I can say also, let's look at another rhetorical component that fits with what you've said. Having raised all of that beautiful, highfalutin, providential standard in Federalist Paper number 2, even this standard of common kinship and citizenry, that's a seeming ancient Republican standard. We have now heard, especially since Federalist 6, of the nature of human beings and the permanent difficulties which follow from that nature. Because of that understanding that's been developed from Federalist Papers 2 through 7, we now get something like a warning. We now have a tolerable understanding of human nature and a decent little grasp of some history that Publius has given us throughout these papers. And because of that understanding, we are not destined to repeat the past. We're capable of forming institutions that can help us escape or relieve us of this doom that might beset us otherwise. That's wonderful. That's not merely a rhetorical component, but it's using that high rhetoric from Fed 2 through all of that nasty stuff in 6 to now say, you and I, we students of the Federalist Papers, have been educated. And we're educated in a way that we can escape from these dangers and challenges. If we are to think soberly about what's going on, and also, most importantly, follow Publius's political science, we're going to be okay. He's about to recommend it and put it fully on the page in Federalist 9, but we have been undergoing this the whole time. So Federalist 8, to repeat, is far from those protections of providence that were discussed in 2, far from the protections that are promised of those visionaries regarding commerce and Republican government that have been discussed. Nonetheless, we still have to work. We have to work hard. We have to be careful. Federalist 8 draws out the implications of failing to do this work well. So why is it that Publius speaks of European wars here? I mean, I think that's interesting.
Well, this beautiful land that we saw in Federalist 2 will become despoiled. The happy rivers linking the states will become overrun with fortifications, devastated and plundered.
Yeah, I think our fear from within as well is noteworthy. We're not going to quite be like those European wars. This is especially discussed in paragraph 2. And then in paragraph 3, in this country, the scene would be altogether reversed. So we're fortified from fear from without, but we will not be fortified from fear from within. And so we go back to that conversation we had earlier, Aaron, about the most terrible sorts of wars. This is an interesting way of saying, look, you know what happened in Europe and you know how terrible it was. It's going to be even worse here. Let's look at the language towards the end of paragraph 3. I love this bit here. The populous states would, with little difficulty, overrun their less populous neighbors. Conquests would be as easy to be made as difficult to be retained. War, therefore, would be desultory and predatory. Plunder and devastation ever march in the train of irregulars. The calamities of individuals would make the principal figure in the events which would characterize our military exploits. Let me repeat one sentence in there that I saw you smirk at, Aaron. Plunder and devastation ever march in the train of irregulars. Look at old Publius with the poetry. What sort of war is this? Look at this language. Desultory and predatory. War seems sporadic, fast-moving, irregular, predatory, leapfrogging from object to object, difficult to retain victories. This seems especially bloody, especially uncertain. You don't have some stronger king coming in, winning and holding it for a while. All this motion here, really tumultuous.
It would be worse than it is in Europe now, at least in the 1780s. All of those military establishments that make war softer, fortification, disciplined armies, do not exist in America. We get to take a breath in paragraph 4. This picture is not too highly wrought, though I confess it would not long remain a just one. So maybe Publius is going to have a solution, a way out of this European-style bloodletting. Safety from external danger is the most powerful director of national conduct. Even the ardent love of liberty will, after a time, give way to its dictates. So the solution out of it is no good. The solution out of it is giving up your liberty in exchange for safety. Because the violent destruction of life and property incident to war will make the nations the most attached to liberty give them up in exchange for safety.
And it's also incompatible with our habits. This is the other thing we can see here. These military strongholds are and these standing armies to protect ourselves that we would have if we don't have the Union. It's incompatible with us. It's incompatible with the ethos of America at this time, Publius lets us see. We should read paragraph 4, Aaron.
This picture is not too highly wrought, though I confess it would not long remain a just one. Safety from external danger is the most powerful director of national conduct. Even the ardent love of liberty will, after a time, give way to its dictates. The violent destruction of life and property incident to war, the continual effort and alarm attendant on a state of continual danger, will compel nations the most attached to liberty to resort for repose and security to institutions which have a tendency to destroy their civil and political rights. To be more safe, they at length become willing to run the risk of being less free.
Your love of liberty alone is not sufficient to deal with external danger. Look at this fact. This is stated as a fact for Publius. It's an axiom. Safety from external danger is the most powerful director of national conduct. Okay, if that's the case, then you need to make yourself safe in a way that's compatible with liberty, because if you're playing catch up on your safety, you're going to lose your liberty. Is that fair to say, Aaron? If safety is falling in between your fingers, all you're going to do is close your fists tightly. And when you do that, there goes liberty. Whereas when we're planning this thing from the beginning, and right now we have this great opportunity to build this with some threats to be sure, but nothing like what's going to come, possibly. Can't stop what's coming. That's a great line from No Country for Old Men. It's a lesson we have to take seriously here, Publius would say. The liberty and safety exist in a tension, to be sure. What Publius is showing us is a way that we can reconcile them, at least internally, by way of union. That stronghold, that fortification.
And can I add, you anti-federalists, you ring the bell of liberty in this debate. If you want liberty, the path to securing it is in the Constitution. It's in a stronger government, and it's in union.
Yeah, so and then you look at it, man, just the fetus of tyranny. It's one thing to say what the fetus of monarchy is, and we've seen something like this, and when you pointed towards paragraph 5 already, but the fetus of tyranny here, any sort of dictatorial force with an interest separate from the people, is to be found in this situation where you build a standing army in order to secure yourself from the threat that's already assaulted you. This will usurp liberty. And this is a tradition which we know running all the way back to Rome. This is a problem with Republican government as experienced in Rome. They didn't have any way of dealing with this problem of threats within themselves without building a standing army, which then just took away our liberty. Paragraph 5 is fantastic on this, because now The specter of standing armies is visible before us here. What Publius says about them in the new constitution, I think, as you've intimated, Aaron, is very evasive. This was your opening remark. He's evasive about, will there be standing armies? Hey, answer me for this. Right now, given what you read, will there be standing armies under the Constitution? It's the right answer. I'm not sure. Aaron nods yes.
Yeah, he's going to pick it up later, and he says in an asterisk, this inference that there will be standing armies from the Constitution, from the very form of the proposition, is, at best, problematical and uncertain. So, you keep reading, but for now, it's uncertain.
But you will have standing armies for sure if you don't have the Union and Constitution. You need the Constitution to have Union. You need the Union to have the Constitution. And now here's the reason why that really should matter to you. If you have those standing armies, you're going to have security, but you're not going to have liberty. There you go. That's the way Publius builds this argument. Whether you find it satisfactory is up to you to determine, but that's what we see going on here. Imagine America as consisting of 13 distinct standing armies, all of which with hostilities between each other. Imagine the politics between these states with their armies, especially as they get increasingly executive in nature, as you pointed out, Aaron, from the end of paragraph 5. So you've got these standing armies. All 13 states are on red alert. And I want to underline, when we see executive here in paragraph 5, I'm going to reread the sentence. It is the nature of war to increase the executive at the expense of the legislative authority. And that's a fact, Jack. That is not a hypothesis. And what I'm trying to underline is, when we see the word executive there, think monarchy, because we are at war. This is a person at war, that huge, huge individual. Monarch, king, a prince. So that's scary stuff. There's no reason that 7 doesn't come back here to haunt us as well. And if Spain all of a sudden is going to go like, hey, what's up? Or England's going to come here and get involved in something. And now the war gets even bigger and nastier because states have foreign powers contributing to and influencing their political and military behavior.
We wonder at what point does intervention by a European monarch become a more salutary proposition than constant interstate warfare?
Stop it. I don't like what you're suggesting, but yeah, what you're saying, to make all the children behave.
Sure.
A strong man to rule. Come on. It's not coming to that, and we won't hear that here in Federalist Paper number 8. What we're going to hear is the voice of Publius, who is offering us a way out through union. But you're right, and with your adventurous thought, but come on.
Well, thank God we don't have to get there because we have this Constitution before us.
Yeah, and we are heeding the warning. We are not destined to fail. No more are we destined to greatness. It's going to take some deliberation and choice. Look at the language at the end of paragraph 6, Fed 8. Thus we should in a little time see established in every part of this country the same engines of despotism, which have been the scourge of the old world. This, at least, would be the natural course of things, and our reasonings will be likely to be just in proportion as they are accommodated to this standard. So when we recognize that this is the natural courses of things, rooted in human nature, also visible in history, wherein human beings act according to their nature, their desires, and so forth, then we can reason justly about the likelihood of this happening and what to do about it. The likelihood is high, so now we can reason justly about what to do. And look at what's said in paragraph 7. These are not vague inferences deduced from speculative defects in a constitution, the whole power of which is lodged in the hands of the people or their representatives and delegates. They are solid conclusions drawn from the natural and necessary progress of human affairs.
It makes me think that the question of this paper is whether America is pre-European or post-European. If America will settle into the kind of warfare that marked Europe, first with armies overrunning states and then the development of fortifications that can hold back these armies, or whether we're post-European in the sense that we can learn the lessons of Europe and apply them on our own soil. That is one of the key tests here, whether we can truly be inheritors of the British legacy and follow their lessons to avoid them.
In addition to that, are we are we stuck in the same cycles of the republics of antiquity?
And that's where paragraph 8 takes us.
That's right. Let me say one word before we get into this, but that's also linked there, right? So this paper, Federalist 8, has Europe at the beginning of it, paragraph 2 especially. And then once we get to paragraph 8, we move to antiquity. And Publius is showing us a way out of both concerns. But before we get there, I do want to concentrate on 7 a little more. Publius says these are solid conclusions drawn from the natural and necessary progress of human affairs. This isn't just him philosophizing in a closet, dreaming. He's not some visionary. These are solid conclusions drawn from the natural and necessary progress of human affairs. Now, Aaron, you've made sure to point out to me the use of the word progress here, which we've seen elsewhere in this paper. How do you think I should understand progress there?
We're not tending toward a better world without conscious decision. Human affairs are not getting better. The light of reason is not spreading. No, progress here just means the way things have to go, not necessarily toward improvement. Here, human nature, if the states are divided, we will progress toward war. We're not going to progress toward perpetual peace in the terms of Federalist 7.
Also, look, we see natural here. We've been playing with nature and human nature. So the natural progress of things or necessary progress of things. Nature itself also has something of necessity bound up with it. I mean, I would just define nature very simply here as necessary. I mean, I don't have to think Aristotle Physics Book 2, but I could just think something that's just, this is the natural course of things. So Aaron, I can put this back when you're thinking of whether we're post-European or not, and the coming thoughts on whether we're capable of moving past the difficulties that plagued ancient republics, and saying, while this is a natural and necessary progress in human affairs, these solid conclusions we're drawing about human nature and human affairs allow us to do something. We're not stuck here. We're capable of behaving so as to fortify ourselves against these likelihoods or behaviors that are most likely to occur. Now, if nature is understood as something necessary, and we have to draw solid conclusions about our understanding of the, quote, progress of human affairs, this is then a sort of reasoning that's very Hobbesian, in my opinion. I have argued that Machiavelli is dripping off the pages in Federalist 6, plenty of Federalist papers, but in particular Federalist 6, because that's what we just did. I've suggested, man, I sure can't help but think of Locke throughout Fed 7. And then now in Fed 8, I feel like I see Hobbes. We are reasoning from the natural condition of man. And these armies, which will be set up to preserve men, as Publius has discussed here, will force men to abandon their liberty for their safety. That's precisely Hobbes. But what's interesting is that that's not America. We don't have to flee our liberty to have safety. Things aren't so desperate that the only solution, and this is another reason why I asked you to hold your tongue, things aren't so desperate that we need a European king, a Leviathan, Aaron said, to come stand over us and make us all safe and keep us from tearing each other apart. So while it looks like Hobbes, the danger is the danger with which Hobbes contended. And Publius is a part of that conversation and showing us a way out that is other than the Leviathan simply. Now, it would be great for an anti-Fed to say, nuh-uh, this is the Leviathan, but it certainly is not, just by way of the fact that the government is subject to checks from the people, to say nothing of the power being split up. But that we'll leave that conversation for the future. Now, my point is we've had Machiavelli in 6, Locke in 7, and I think Hobbes here in 8. And I'm going to just say a word to try and put a bow on my point. Let's preserve the Union. We do not want the military state to become elevated above the civil. Publius will use those words exactly in paragraph 11. So therefore, we need the Union. We must preserve it. And he says towards the end of the paper, every prudent and honest man of whatever party must consider and admit this. This whole idea is not superficial, it's not futile, it's solid, it's weighty. just the same as Publius says in paragraph 7, that these are solid conclusions drawn from the natural and necessary progress of human affairs regarding the natural course of things that would lead us to construct standing armies and become 13 states at war with each other. He ends the paper by saying, our liberties would be prey to the means of defending ourselves against the ambition of jealousy and jealousy of each other. That's a solid and weighty idea. It's no superficial or futile matter. You better grow up and be serious. It's deserving of the most serious and mature consideration. That's effectively somebody just telling you, grow up, stop playing. And then he also at the same time raises us a little. He's not just being mean to us. He says, every prudent and honest man of whatever party. Well, guess what? I'm prudent. And even if I'm lying to myself, I'm honest. So I want to be involved in this. Publius said we've got the back of his hand that's kind of hitting us a little bit, and then the palm where he's pulling us in to his understanding. Have I moved too far towards the end of this paper, Aaron, or is it okay to discuss the end of it at this point with?
No, I think so. Maybe we can walk backward toward paragraph 13, because once we've built the Union as fortification binding together the states such that they do not go in their separate ways, they do not form separate confederacies, they do not go to war together, only then can we admire the situation of America, protected to our east by an ocean, protected to our west by an ocean, an island empire, really. So as soon as you take care of the seaboard in the west, then you're in a remarkably safe position. Of course, American history has borne this out. We've had one civil war. We've been invaded once since 1775 by a European power. Once bound together, American history is remarkably peaceable.
It's really great here also to see now and reflect upon why it is that disunion is so terrifying. It's one thing to say, well, I'm looking for the positive arguments for union. And what you've helped us see, Aaron, especially with your opening remarks on Fed 8, Publius doesn't want to answer it in the way that the person who asked that question raises the question. Publius says, wait a minute, do you think that what we're doing with this union is to your disadvantage? What you want to do is truly to your disadvantage, having something other than union. So Publius does flip it on its head, as you've said, Aaron, and make the onus on you to show how it is that having anything other than a complete conglomeration of the states, union of the states underneath energetic federal government, anything other than that is going to breed standing armies. What's this beautiful language here that we saw? War as desultory and predatory, plunder and devastation ever march in the train of irregulars. Could you imagine that being on your flag? How is it that you could possibly keep that from happening with your standing armies? And how much liberty are you going to have in that place? You're leaving the Union because you don't have liberty, you South Carolinians? Dare I say, you Texans? Publius is here to say you're not going to have liberty because you're going to be under such threat of war or experience such war that seceding is going to be the worst idea you've ever come up with. Here's the conclusion then. Rejecting the Constitution is rejecting the Union. So therefore, preserve the Union, ratify the Constitution. Rejection guarantees destruction. Is this a bridge too far? Ratification guarantees safety. Ratification guarantees liberty. The word guarantee, I'm always hesitant to suggest that, but at least by proceeding via the negative, Publius would allow me to say very safely, according to Publius, ratification increases the likelihood of liberty and safety. Rejection makes undoubtedly the fact that you will not have liberty because you will be so clawing for safety. And there's no guarantee that you're going to have safety.
To bring us back toward your comment about civil-military relations, where Publius says that right now the civil is above the military, constant war will flip that arrangement. I think he admires the situation that the modern republic is in, where not every man is a soldier. The classical republics, they didn't have standing armies like Americans would have to have if split into union like Europe has to have. Because in America, the army is what we might call a separate interest. It's distinct from the body of the citizens. If war was a constant feature of American life, that would no longer be the case. And furthermore, the military establishment would come to be interposed above the civilian establishment. In paragraph 11, quote, the military state becomes elevated above the civil. The inhabitants of territories, often the theater of war, are unavoidably subjected to frequent infringements on their rights, which serve to weaken their sense of those rights. And by degrees, the people are brought to consider the soldiery not only as their protectors, but as their superiors.
Look how undemocratic or anti-democratic this institution is. In the name of democracy, it undermines it and erodes it.
And earlier you said it's not just that we have our rights, we have a sense of our rights. We have habits that are attached to these institutions. The roots of our ability to have and exercise rights, those are going down the drain with standing armies.
Yeah. So the concluding sentence here then from Publius makes a whole heck of a lot of sense, doesn't it? The concluding sentence of Federalist Paper number 8, the airy phantoms that now flit before the distempered imaginations of some of its adversaries would then quickly give place to the more substantial prospects of dangers, real, certain, and extremely formidable. So these formidable dangers are undeniably real. Publius has created the specter of all of this horror before our eyes in this paper, in these chunks of paper, I would say, running from 3 to 8. And at the same time, he ends by saying, yeah, and that boogeyman is real and going to get you. Because these dangers are real. They're real because I've shown you in history. They're certain because I've shown you in my understanding of human nature in history. And by all means, I've shown you how dangerous they are. They're extremely formidable. So are you convinced, Aaron? Are you voting yes to ratify the Constitution just simply on the basis of union? Or do you need dozens upon dozens of more Federalist Papers to convince you?
Well, listen, I'm satisfied on the standing army front. And as a good American, jealous of my rights, fearful of war, I'm ready to read on. I've got other concerns. I'm worried about faction. I'm worried about the size of the republic. But Publius totally raised the specter that Americans are fearful of. Very quickly shows me that I am wrong to consider that the Constitution is going to strengthen the executive beyond what I wish, and that the Constitution is going to raise standing armies prejudicial to my rights.
The Union is the gift that keeps on giving. You would think, oh, okay, well, we're done with it. No, we're talking about this by all means overtly through 14. It's not over yet. You brought up your concern about faction. We're going to see not merely just safety, but something of good government as Republican governments start to develop because of union. Union keeps giving. And so any appreciation we might have now with Fed 8, I would like to suggest we continue to move on and say, well, in times of duress and secession and war and all of this, that's right. But what about just the next policy decision? What about when legislature's in session? We really need to make things exist inside of the states themselves, which are then living with other states. There's something about socializing. I mean, socializing, like how you would socialize a dog, you know, how it is, or how it is really important to have play dates for your kids. It's really important for you and me, just for us to get out of the house, to go be with people. Imagine just how much being a social creature is a part of being a political creature, and how much accommodation and softening, not just mere bourgeois values, but also what it means to live with others. That thinking or idea is something that you and I could latch onto as students, let's say, who are completely new to the study of government, especially as Publius is offering it, and say, I wonder if that's helpful. You know, I got to know more people and see things a little differently as I talked to them and got to know them. I wonder if that's a helpful way of starting to think about how it is that union has more than just the fortification goodness about it. It actually has another way of making union by way of forcing us to talk with each other. But let me say something. Has Publius fallen somewhat out of view in Fed 8? Where's Publius here?
I think the personal pronoun that has replaced I is we. As much as the rhetorical strategy of Federalist 8 is aimed at the opponents of the Constitution, there is no you. The people of New York were called to deliberate, but the you, there's no you, even if it were directed at the anti-federalists. Instead, we are considering this as Americans, not as New Yorkers, not as Virginians, but as Americans who are terrified at the idea of internecine war.
That makes a lot of sense in a conversation about union. You open it up and you speak of we. This is something I learned from Professor Schaub, as she has been careful in her study of Lincoln to trace Lincoln's use of that.
Of the personal pronoun.
Yeah, she would say, look, when you're reading someone serious, pay attention. Those we's, those I's, those ours, those us's are very deliberate.
I know in that essay on the second inaugural, she absolves Lincoln of a grammatical error as he was trying to avoid using the pronoun I to depersonalize himself, which he does in the July 4th address, too.
Yeah, so this is interesting to pay attention to as another layer of Publius's rhetoric. Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. Yeah, cool. All right, well, I say we put a pin in it. Call it.
Right.
Thanks for talking with me about Federalist 8, Aaron. Good.
All
See you later.
Yeah, take care.
This has been the Good Government Podcast with Aaron Slutkin and Michael Hoffpauir.